Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring Fabula Ultima TTJRPG. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review featuring this tabletop role-playing game that attempts to bring the Japanese video game RPG experience to your table, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about dungeons. The concept of a dungeon is a common trope in any type of RPG, tabletop and digital alike. Generally, a dungeon is frequently, but not always, a labyrinthine environment, inhabited by hostile creatures, and often concealing valuable treasures and powerful magical items, or acting as an evil antagonist's lair. In Fabula Ultima, the term dungeon is used to indicate a somewhat complex location that is worthy of being explored. It could be an abandoned mill turned into a brigand hideout, a witch's castle, or a network of waterways guarded by ancient golems. Most of the time, the dungeon itself won't be that important. Why the heroes are there and what can be found within it is what really matters. Other times, a dungeon can be a powerful way to tell a story about those who inhabited it, and maybe hint at some obscure truths or provide an answer to some of the game world's mysteries. Depending on the size and importance of the dungeon in question, the game master may handle things in different ways. For example, using dungeon scenes. The exploration is run as a succession of key moments rather than an inch-by-inch search of the dungeon. This works best when the layout of the dungeon is mostly irrelevant, and all that matters is what lies in its depths. This approach is identical to default gameplay. You can also handle things via detailed exploration. The entire dungeon can be explored in its every nook and cranny. This approach can be quite time-consuming, and should only be used if the structure and details of the place tell an important story. There is also the interlude method. The exploration is narrated as an interlude scene, with maybe a single group check establishing whether the player characters encounter any obstacles or dangers before they reach the depths of the dungeon. Use this approach if you are short on time and if the dungeon isn't particularly important. The typical location would be a minor location discovered while traveling. Also, the game master can use clocks to keep track of incoming threats in the dungeon. These danger clocks should feature a number of sections based on the urgency of the threat they represent. For example, the game master could use 8 sections for a threat that isn't immediately obvious, and will only come true with time. Something like crumbling temple or Magitech system failure. Or maybe the game master employs 4 sections for a threat that is urgent and very likely to happen. Something like surrounded or high alert in a dungeon brimming with hostile creatures. The game master may feel a danger clock as a consequence of failed checks, as well as when an event would make the threat more likely, such as when the player characters spend time searching a room, they make noise, they rest inside the dungeon, or draw unwanted attention. Different danger clocks will be triggered by different actions and events, of course. Casting a spell might feel an arcane overload clock, while searching a room is unlikely to affect it. As the clock fills, the game master should foreshadow the incoming danger. Once it is completely filled, that threat will become active in full, and the heroes will be forced to deal with it one way or another. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part we are going to talk about magic. I like the way that dungeons are handled in this role-playing game. Some dungeons are more important than others, so sometimes you want to handle things as a prelude, or handle things using clocks. But in other occasions you want a more detailed approach. And this is particularly true of different video game Japanese RPGs. Some dungeons are just a series of rooms and corridors, and you have to fight through different enemy encounters in order to reach your goal. But in other cases, the dungeons are filled with switches, buttons, moving blocks. So the tools included in this section of Fabula Ultima are great to represent any of those cases. Thank you for watching this part of the review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.